welcome back to this episode of the Women and Money Cafe with the slightly sweary title. Now, I know you're not shocked because it's not the first time that we've done this, but we've got a guest with us today. And I'm gonna let her introduce herself in a minute, but I need to explain how Laura ended up on our podcast. So I know Laura because we're in a similar networking group, and she put out a post on a Reddit. And I thought, oh my God, she so needs to come on our podcast. She was talking about the kind of things that she can talk about. And one of them was, can I actually say it? I'm going to say it and I'll just tick the box on Buzzsprout. Fuck perfectionism. This is the title of something that Laura talks about. And it's how perfectionism keeps us poor. And I thought, oh my God, how relevant is that to us and you guys? So I thought, let's get Laura on to chat about it. So now that I've given you that rather sweary intro, Laura, would you like to just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
I can do. Hello, everyone, and apologies for. No, do you know what? I'm not going to apologise for the fact that I have a potty mouth. Let's just own it. But I am a PR strategist and a mentor for predominantly female service-based business owners who know that they are here on this earth to do greater things than what they're doing and are maybe slightly jaded, sick and tired of being on the social media hamster wheel, but feel like there's no other way of raising awareness, getting their message out there, being visible. I am here to show that there is another way, and that is by tapping into the power and potency of PR and mainstream media, which causes people to freak out. But I do it in a way that makes sense and in a way that feels good to you too, because being visible can be a barrier.
Yeah. All right. But that's interesting because I think just about everybody that listens to this podcast has discovered us because of social media. And that's because we've all been on the social media hamster wheel, as you described it. I love that, by the way. And again, I guess there's a fair few of them that are also using it for their businesses. And they're like, yeah, I'm not really loving this. Actually, I know that for a fact of some of them. So I'm hoping that over the next sort of 30, 40 minutes, you're going to share with us some of your great PR tips. But I think what I would really love to just start with is this. Where did this come from? This perfectionism keeps us poor. Talk to me about that.
So I will confess that I am very type A. I'm a high achiever. And I've also been a people pleaser. And I've just kind of gone through life, always questioning if I've done enough.
Hmm.
Not am I enough? Have I done enough? Could I have done more? And I really had to work on that behavior and that belief. And do you know what? If what I'm doing is all I can give, that's all I can give. That is enough. And there are times in my professional career when I've spent so long trying to get something perfect because I've not wanted somebody to think that I'm sloppy or scrappy or I'm not an expert or I'm not a credible business owner, that you end up getting pulled down a rabbit hole. And do you know what? Nobody fucking cares. Nobody cares when there's a typo in your newsletter. Nobody cares if you put a picture of you up in your dressing gown on your Instagram feed. It's normal. And we're all normal human beings and we're all doing normal things, but we're made to feel like we have to look a certain way and present ourselves in a certain way and be a certain size or shape or weight to be successful. And I'm like, oh, it's just bullshit. So it's like, just show up as you are. And it's difficult, okay? I haven't always been able to embrace who I am. I don't think I even knew who I was until my 30s. Now I'm 40 and I've said to people, I'm in my fuck it era. I'm like, do you know what? If I offend you, I offend you. That is not my problem. If you believe that I could do more, that's your issue, not mine. I'm just going to live my life and do what I want. And as long as it makes me happy and it brings me joy, the rest of you are irrelevant.
Oh my God. Okay. So I've got that excited about you, Laura, and your message. I've completely forgotten to introduce my co-host on it. So she's on the sofa with me and Laura today. There's Sarah, and Sarah, you're giggling your head off. So I'm thinking a lot of what Laura's saying is resonating with you.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Yeah, I bloody love it. Except it took me to my 50s, love. So you're doing really well.
All right. And at the other end of the sofa, I've got Emily with me as well. And Emily, what's your take on this so far? Looking slightly
And no,
stunned.
I just thought everything you said is my inner voice. I don't know if I've ever said it, but yeah, this is what I tell myself. You know, what other people think of me is their business.
And
Yeah.
is that the only voice, Emily, in your head?
Do you know, actually, I must do a shout out anyway for books that I'm reading at the moment, and it's called Limitless by a very clever guy called Jim Quick. Anyway, he says you've got a really annoying inner critic in your head, and he's stopping you from meeting your full potential. And what you got to do is give him a really silly name and tell him to fuck off every now and then. The mine's called Keith. So Keith's the other voice in my head. I just tell him to fuck off all the time.
Mine's called Macapaca. People with children of a certain age will know what I'm talking about. Sarah, have you got a voice in your head and does it have a name?
Yeah, she's called Betty.
Bloody hell, it's all coming out now, isn't it, Laura? Voices in your head?
Yeah, but I've never actually named it because I've never wanted to give it that much power. I'm not naming it. I'm just going to tell you to fuck off whenever you pop up. No, you are not welcome here today.
I think the idea behind naming it is that you externalize it.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't have a name, then you're fooled into thinking it's you talking to you. It's not you talking to you, it's that annoying negative person over there.
Yeah, it's interesting because my alter ego has a name.
Oh, tell us more.
Oh. So I guess it's in a similar vein to Beyonce having Sasha Fierce. If I'm ever, when I know I need to put my big girl pants on, but the inner voice is stopping me, I unleash LaQuisha. LaQuisha is an absolute goddess. She's more than happy to turn up in her dressing gown and her fluffy slippers and ask for whatever she wants. She doesn't care about the outcome. She's asked. And she knows if she just keeps asking for what she wants, at some point she'll get it.
Oh, I love this. Right, so I'm going to get a friend for Macapaca. It's not Opsy Daisy. I'm going to go away and give this one some thought. All right, this is, I knew this was going to be a good one.
Come back and tell us the name, won't you, Julie?
Yeah, you should.
Now I'm going to give it a lot of thought, and I will come back to it. I will share with the listeners. So going back, and before this is going to be a proper tangent episode, I can just tell. So you were saying, Laura, it was that realization that questioning yourself.
Yeah.
And so what changed for you?
Years ago, and now that I'm on my 40 and the years just blur together, I don't remember how long ago. It was probably fairly early on in my kind of business owner journey. So we're probably looking back 5, 6 years, maybe longer.
Mm.
And I'd always kind of liked the idea of like working with a coach, like a life coach. But nothing had really happened to lead me to one. You know, there hasn't been any obvious trauma. There hasn't been any kind of breakup or abuse. And it was almost like, I feel like there's something. I don't know what that something is. And it's not a big enough reason to kind of go and seek the help and advice of someone else. And I joined a local networking group, and the lady who ran the group was a life coach. And I started having sessions with her. And that's when I started to realize some of my behaviors. And I remember this one particular evening, it was a Friday night, and we were fostering a dog. So I think at the time I had 2 dogs, and we were fostering this other dog, and that dog wasn't getting on with one of our other dogs, and they were fighting, and I had to pull them apart, and I got bitten, and it was just super stressful. So I ended up asking my parents to then look after this foster dog. So I then felt responsible for this foster dog. So to be fair, my parents live on the other side of the village. I'm not schlepping halfway across the world. So I'd, make the effort to go and visit my mum and dad and check they were okay with this dog. And this dog lunged at me. And then I was like, oh God, I've got to go home. But I can't be bothered to cook. So I'm going to get a takeaway. And I pulled up outside the chippy and I phoned my husband because the queue was out the door. Like, how dare people be queuing for a chippy tea on a Friday night? And while I was on the phone, the guy whose car was parked in front of mine started effing and jeffing at me. Now, whether this was LaQuisha or or being a critic, I decided in that moment to wind my window down and confront the man with, what the fuck do you think you're saying to me? What's your problem? Like honestly, I mean, if there was ever a fight or flight situation, trust that I am going to fight. But this just kind of came out of nowhere. And he was like, you're parked too close to me. And I was like, well, I didn't do it. So by the time I'd gone into the chippy and come home, like I'm wound up, like tightly coiled spring. And I was relaying this story to the life coach. And she was like, do you think that's acceptable behavior? Oh, I didn't miss. I didn't miss. So we worked through it. And she was almost saying, you're taking on so much baggage from other people. You're taking responsibility for this dog that's not your dog. And because of a situation that's happened in your house, you've now asked your parents to look after this dog, but you still feel responsible for the dog. And then you also feel responsible for how your parents are caring for this dog. And then you're trying to do the good thing and pick up some dinner for you and your husband. And that's winding you up. So when the bloke comes along and starts effing and jeffing at you, that's because you felt disrespected. Respect is super high up on my kind of, is it values ladder? I'm not entirely sure. So the fact that he then started swearing at me for no reason, it was almost like, well, hold on a minute. But because I wasn't in a rational state of mind, because I was already wound up by the dog and the dog lunging at me and then the queue being so long. And then I was a bit like, wow, okay. So I'm willingly accepting other people's baggage and then getting frustrated at myself because I've got my own baggage and now I'm accepting someone else's baggage and I'm angry with the world, but I've made that decision. And it was just, whoa, it was as if I could see this other version of Laura. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, no wonder I behave like that. And I mean, still to this day, I can go from not to psycho, but I try not to pick that. I do try and kind of do the work to not get to that point. But yeah, it was really, I mean, when people say you need to hold the mirror up and look at yourself, my God, it is ugly. And I think that's when I started to realize what was causing certain behaviors of mine and that I had to take responsibility for that. It was nobody else's fault but my own. And I think once you start to accept all the parts of you, that's when you can start to become a better human being.
Mm. Right, well, thank you for sharing the entertaining story, I think, and then lighter story. But see what's striking me as you're talking to me about, because I recognize elements of this where you're trying to be all things for all people all the time. And then this idea of perfectionism. Is this where you can get like a form of perfectionism that crosses over where you're trying to be perfect in all your relationships? And really, is this idea of what we think perfect is? Because a perfect relationship isn't about, always giving somebody what they want. It has to be about balance, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think speaking your truth.
Right. So how then if we take that, because I think a lot of people are going to relate to this, aren't they? How does then this kind of pattern of behavior with regards to trying to be perfect and trying to be all things to all people, how is that affecting our money, Laura? If you want to take a minute, because we've got caused you to call. So Emily, I was just wondering if you had wanted to come in with any thoughts at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of friends who I would describe, and they would describe themselves as perfectionists. And frankly, they can be irritating because They can't always see it. They can maybe notice it afterwards that they've been a bit funny, but in the moment, they don't. And I think I used to be a little bit like that in my younger days until I discovered Brené Brown. And I always remember a very poignant story that she told. I think it might have been in the first Brené Brown book that I ever read. And it was about how she was staying up late at night to bash these cookies that she had to send in with her child into school the next day. And obviously the reason she was bashing them is because they were shop bought. She couldn't possibly have anyone think that she bought these cookies and that, she wanted them to look homemade. And I just thought, Jesus Christ, I have been this person at times. And I think it got worse when I had children. Because not only then was I this, professional person, but I was also supposed to be really bloody good at being a mother as well. I remember sort of being, 2 weeks postpartum, inviting loads of people around to my house and home baking 3 different cakes when my child was 2 weeks old. And all I wanted was for all of my friends to say what an amazing cake I'd made. I think I must have still been delirious from the birth. But I think once you realize some of these behaviors, you realize how absurd it is. And Laura's absolutely right. I mean, we're just human. What's wrong with being human? It's enough.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Laura, have you got your breath back yet after a bit of a tickly cough?
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
As well, actually, Emily, what you were just saying, and I think a lot of what we're taught is from our peers and from our family members. And then we end up taking this information forward. So, and I'm sure our parents didn't mean us any harm, but I sometimes still feel like we're living as women to standards that were set in a very different era, in a very different time. And I haven't got children through choice. And I see my friends and I see clients who are raising children, who are running their own business, or they are working a corporate job and they're just trying to do everything. And I'm just like, when did this happen? And I don't want to be all feminist and say,
Oh, you can be on this show, by the way. Right, we're all for that kind of carry on.
It's almost like we said we wanted it all, but because we can't do it all to a standard that we want, we then feel like failures.
Yeah.
We don't
That's it in a nutshell.
or we don't feel like we're good enough. Or hold on a minute. Or my grandma used to be able to raise 6 children. Yeah, but that was her job.
And she probably had grandparents helping her.
Yeah.
I think they did something on that one.
We're living longer. The retirement age is older. So actually, if I was to have children now, my mum still works full time. My dad still works full time.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have family around me to support me in the way that my nan would have been able to support my parents. And I think it's just this kind of fractured society of, right, women, you need to be the nurturers and you need to raise the children. And if there's something wrong with your child, you're the one that goes to the school. You're the one that picks them up in the emergency. And it's almost like, but why? And I remember, it must have been about 2 years ago. And whenever our dogs needed to go to the vets, I was always phoning the vet and I was always taking the dog to the vet. And I just thought, why? Is it because I'm based at home? And I remember at one point my income then got higher than Hayden's. So I'd be like, well, I'm earning more money now. So you finish work early. You take the dog to the vet. Or why don't you book the appointment and make the appointment for when you finish work? Because I thought it's always just because I'm at home, like accepting parcels or people thinking that they can turn up unannounced at 11:30 in the morning. It's
God, no.
No, this is my working hours. It's irrelevant that I've done no work today.
They don't need to know that, do they?
No, But now I feel guilty because now I'm going to spend an extra 2 hours talking to you and not working. Then obviously that's my issue to work through. But yeah, I just think all these kind of expectations, I don't know who set them. I don't know them. I don't want to play
It
the game anymore.
sounds like you've rejected them, Laura, quite firmly.
Yeah, I think it's Keith telling me I've got to do this. You have got to tell him to F off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the point, isn't it? It's like, that's a really good question. Who's telling you this?
Oh yeah, whose
And
voice is it?
whose voice is it? Whose expectation is it? And actually, a lot of the time it is your own, but you've kind of, you like to blame someone and say, I've got it from my mother or my grandmother or my,
Yeah.
And maybe you have a little bit, but you are the one that's in control of your life. And if you want to tell Keith to F off, tell him to F off.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's basically what any decent counsellor starts and finishes with, isn't it? Work out where it's coming from. Work out what your own values are and tell the other ones to F off.
I just patronise Macapash. Because let's face it, he walks around polishing rocks all day. Right? You can't really give a lot of credence to anything he's got to say, can you, when you take that into account? But I just find this kind of conversation really, really interesting because it's all these stories that are playing out in our head that are keeping us, holding us back. Because one of the things you were saying at the start about having a typo, right? I can remember if we got me back maybe 10 years ago, like, because I'm an English graduate as well. So, my email should be reasonably good. And so it would take me so long sometimes. If it was an important message or if it was to someone important, I'd sit there and overthink the heck out of it. So see if I just said what I had to say, boom, we get done. Because I don't know if you spotted, I can talk quite easily. But when it came to writing, then I'm overthinking it so much. But now, like yourself, I got to the stage now where I really don't give a shit anymore. And so it's not so much typos, but I'll have whole words missing out sentences. Anybody that's ever had an email from me, it's like, where did that word go? And it's just like, I wonder if one of the things that helps is just as you get older, you've got more confidence for some of us.
Yeah.
We're maybe feeling a little bit more secure in life. That's going to make it easier. So I'm just wondering, with all the women and all the people that you've worked with, what tips would you give people to help them start moving from that bit where they're agonizing over the email or whatever it is that has to be perfect to getting to the point where they're just like, I don't give a shit.
It is a process because it's new to you and it's alien. So whenever people are like, oh, JFDI, it's like, oh, come on. It's a little bit more deep than JFDI. Actually, let's do baby steps. So I would almost, and this is where like my kind of playful, rebellious side comes in. I'd almost make a spelling mistake on purpose in an email and just see if it gets noted.
Pause for a second, right? Listeners, our challenge for you for the next email that you send, we want you to deliberately make a spelling mistake and just see how it feels and see if anybody spots it. I know someone that does something wacky like this with their emails and their blogs. They put a random word or sentence in it just to see if anybody notices. Can't remember who it is. They do it for fun. But yeah, challenge listeners, let's start being a little bit more imperfect. Right?
Would you be really cheeky about the word as well? Like, so
I think we know Laura's answer to that one.
you know what? I spent a whole summer handing out CVs around all these shops in Edinburgh saying that I'd won awards in public speaking.
What?
And I didn't get a job. So that's what I'm saying. You can be a little bit funny with it, can't you? Intentionally or not.
Well, this is it. And I think as well, I mean, I wouldn't overthink being funny on purpose. Like just misspell a word. And I think now, because so many of us are creating content on social media, sometimes our thumbs move faster than our brain can engage. It's only after you reread your social media post to praise yourself on how awesome it is, and yes, do that. It's like, oh, oh, that was a spelling mistake. And it's almost, can I leave it? Can I actually live with myself knowing that I've spotted a mistake? I can't be bothered to edit it. Oh, I think,
Apparently, you don't get the boost on the algorithm if you go in and edit.
oh, really?
Apparently.
Oh,
Somebody told me that.
They see this
wow.
is social media black magic, hocus pocus. We're entering in now. I'm just going to do a quick plug. All right. In an upcoming episode, we do have someone coming along to detoxify social media for us. So stay tuned for that episode coming up. But anyway, on with the show. Laura, what other tips have you got for us for cracking this perfectionism?
Oh, cracking perfectionism.
Or even just, things that you've learned or you've observed with the people that you've worked with.
I tend to work with a lot of women who are similar to me, who have gone through a large part of their life following the rules, and it didn't serve them. And they've got to a certain point, whether it's their 40s or their 50s, and they've thought, no, I'm getting off this ride. No, it's crap. I want to do something else. So a lot of the women I attract have set up their business because they decided to walk their own path, and now they want to kind of shine a guiding light for others who want to do something similar, show what's possible. And it's always that kind of rebellious streak. And that's probably what attracts me to these particular clients, because it's like, yeah, there's a chink in the armor.
I've no idea why we've been attracted to each other. Zero.
That's what I want to hone in on. And as well, because, I've worked in the PR industry for 20 years, I know what journalists are looking for. So when I see a chink, I'm like, that is it. Because we can only stop taboo subjects being taboo if we talk about them. And it's not always comfortable and it's not always easy. But if you are passionate about what you're doing and it's a deep enough passion, you start to realize that the end result is far more important than how perfect you are along the way.
I think you've just described our podcast.
We're not perfect.
No, none of us were big visibility people when we started, and we are still making it up as we go along. But because we give a shit so much about, empowering women around money and making it easier to talk about money, we turn up and we don't mind that we're not perfect.
That's what it's all about. And how many?
Apart from
downloads?
Emily, who clearly is perfect, every bloody week, can't you, Emily?
Can't spell clearly on my CV even. But no, how many downloads now, Julie? Coming on.
We're going to be pushing 15,000 very soon. So thanks very much, listeners, and for all the lovely reviews that we've had as well. Because the nice people at CBRE have been leaving us reviews. So it was a pleasure talking to them. Sorry, little plug in there for CBRE.
Please like, share, and subscribe, guys, and review.
Get that review in.
Please. Pretty please. Like, well, what were we talking about before we went off on a tangent there?
Being rebellious, going against the grain, rewriting the rule book.
Right. So
how to get used to not being perfect.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So we've all got this little voice in our head, this inner critic, whatever he happens to be called. Then have we all potentially got this little rebel inside us as well?
Yes.
The little rebel that does want to stick two fingers up at the status quo. The little rebel that doesn't care that they made a spelling mistake. The little rebel that's going to swear on a podcast. And is that the voice that we need to be channeling a little bit more if we want to combat this perfectionism? Sarah, you look like you've got an inner rebel.
Yeah, she does.
What would happen if we let the rebel out?
Chaos, probably.
And that's interesting. Is it scary, the thought of letting the rebel out?
It's getting less and less scary now, I'd say each day, as each day passes. But if you'd asked me a few years ago, no, those big pants would have been firmly in the drawer. So, yeah, I think going back to what we were talking about earlier when we said about women and the perfectionism, I know we went off on talking about children, but I always go back to this. When my kids were little, I really, really struggled. Like Emily said, I don't think I made cakes, but it's that same vein of behaviour. And then years down the line, met a mum on the school gate who turned out was a bit like us, definitely had an inner rebel. And we used to meet up with a couple of other mums for a drink. And one day she said, come to mine. And we sat in her towable caravan on her driveway. I'm sure the whole neighbourhood heard what we were talking about, certainly heard the laughing. But what really struck me, and it's stayed with me ever since, was we all ended up talking about how we struggled when our kids were little and how we thought everyone else was doing a better job than we were. And if only we bloody talked about it. And I think you can apply that to any aspect, whether it's your business or raising a family or anything. We just need to just be open and honest and say, well, I'm having this kind of day. I struggle with this. And suddenly someone else will go, yeah, me too. And then you realize none of us are perfect. But you put so much pressure on yourself because you project onto others what you think that perfectionism should be, don't you? And you think they've all got that. They're looking at you with that, but they're not. They don't give a shit. They're too busy with their own crap.
We're all a hot mess.
Yes. I like the hot mess. I like that.
That's very true. I mean, I remember saying to people, not at the time, but a bit afterwards, after I was through the worst of it, but I remember saying, basically, I think most people get postnatal depression. And they'll look at me going, but whether it is what you would call depression or whether it is not, whether it's just a massive shift in your mental state, I don't think you can deny that it happens when your life changes so drastically. And I think that probably was one of the lowest times of my life. And you're right, there was not enough people talking about it. And now I'm at a different stage in my life, but now I talk a lot about menopause after reading Davina McCall's book and following all the influencers on Instagram and things. And I talk to people all the time about menopause. And some of them just look at me in denial, age 46. No, I'm fine. Okay.
Yeah, give it a couple of years.
Yeah, you might be fine. And they're the same people telling me, oh, they're really hot. Oh, I'm feeling really anxious today. They're coming out with all of the symptoms. And I'm like, oh, yeah, symptom menopause, that is. But you don't have it. It's all right. It's fine.
That river in Egypt, isn't it? Denial.
We go through all this stuff and we have all this extra stuff and we still think we need to be perfect. I'm like, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. This is insanity, isn't it?
It's total insanity. Yeah.
I wonder as well, and maybe, is it perfectionism or is it comparisonitis? And I've just been thinking that actually, listening to our conversation, it's like, well, where does this expectation of perfection come from? Is it because we see other people around us and make judgments based on what we're seeing?
Yeah, assumptions.
Yeah. Or is this reality? Because the four of us, we're going to have, something could happen and we're all going to have a different version of events and it's all the truth, but each of our stories will differ. So it's almost, and again, I think this is where I sometimes have issues with social media because it's far too easy for people to only showcase the perfect and the polished, which I think makes me even more determined to show up in my dressing gown and bag under my eyes and dog slobber all over me because that's my life and other people can relate to that more than they can relate to me having, photo shoot ready skin and a wardrobe to die for. They're like, that's one moment in time. That's not a reflection of my life. And I just wonder if the last 5 or 10 years where social media has been so highly polished and everything's produced to an inch of its life is almost skewing the truth.
Absolutely.
I think you're onto something there. I think if we had the previous generation of perfectionism being fed from how previous generations lived, then the current generation of perfectionism is being fed by social media.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And even, and obviously I've worked in the PR industry, I went to university at 18 to study it. So it's been in my life for over 20 years. And the media gets a really bad rap. And I can understand because of the way they report things, but that's had to change and adapt to social media because, back in the day, if there was like a bomb explosion on London Bridge, news reporters would be the first people to hear about that from the Metropolitan Police. Now it's somebody who stood next to the bomber filming it with their phone. So that person now informs news teams, and then the news teams have to react really quickly because they need to be seen to be leading with the news, not responding to people on their phones. And it's like the world's gone mad.
It has.
So
But it leads me on to a question that I have for you then. So obviously, like, you've come down off that fence about how you feel about social media and how businesses should be promoting themselves. So talk to me then about the case for PR for good, the difference that PR can make, and what some of the barriers are that people have with regards sort of putting themselves out there.
Yeah. I would say the first one is whenever I talk about the media, people automatically think of the Sun and the Daily Mail. And then they don't get any further than the Sun or the Daily Mail because both of those newspapers have a reputation, not necessarily a good one. And then a lot of what they may see shared online by their peers, by their coaches, their mentors, people that they're in groups with, tends to be them sharing their rags to riches story. I went from 30 grand in debt to earning 3 million a year. If you haven't been through that, you're going to start thinking, oh, well, I can't get featured in the press because I don't have a rags to riches story. No, that's not for me. No, I don't want to be in the Sun or the Daily Mail. And I don't have a rags to riches story. So PR's not for me. The media landscape is massive. And, now we have podcasts, we have YouTube channels. They're not mainstream media, but they're also not social media. YouTube is a video channel. Podcasts are an audio channel. So it's all about, for me, it's figuring out where you need to be seen to get in front of your audience. So for me, my clients are female business owners. So what do? I make sure that I'm positioned in the different media outlets that are going to be read, watched, listened to by other female business owners. I've never had to share my personal story once. Sometimes on podcasts, it comes out. And
Stay tuned for part 2, listeners.
Part of it could be because I also believe I don't have a dramatic or traumatic enough story to make it into the papers. But to be honest, that's okay because there's so much more to me than drama or trauma. I've got 20 years experience in an industry. I am one of very few friends who's decided not to have children. I was the first female in my family to go to university. There's a lot of firsts going on for me. And while that's great, that's hard. So I kind of almost want to say to people, look, I want to show up and just show you that anything is possible. Just make sure that you really want to do it. And you're not doing it because your parents want you to be a certain way or because you've got all this pressure to earn a certain amount of money. And money has to be like the biggest taboo subject ever, even still today in 2023. So I'm almost like, I just want, do you know what? I actually think my superpower is I've always been like, oh, I'm just average, always had average grades, always like average cleverness, wit, attractiveness. And I'm like, do you know, I'm here flying the flag for average people that you can do what you want. Actually, sometimes being average is better because nobody's paying any attention to you because you're not like up here, but also you're not down there either. So you can kind of get away with what you want because eyes aren't on you. So I think then having eyes on you in the media, all of a sudden it's like, oh God, oh no, I don't want that. I don't want trolls leaving nasty comments about me on social media. I can't cope with people's opinions and judgment of me. And that for me is a big sticking point, is what other people think of me. So when I kind of say to people, if you're featured online, don't ever read the comments because nothing nice happens there. It's just opinionated people with nothing better to do talking to you about what a terrible person you are. And it's irrelevant what you're talking about. It could be that you've retired your husband early, which is amazing for the family dynamic. But Susan in Carlisle thinks you're a piece of shit because your husband should be the breadwinner. Sorry if you're called Susan and live in Carlisle. It's just, it's almost, and this is why I always have to say to people, just always remember why you are doing what you're doing and let that purpose outweigh anything that's going to come and try and knock you off the path along the way.
The bloody wise one. So, Sarah, as we're just kind of drawn towards the end of this episode, Sarah, I'm just wondering, what's your biggest takeaway from this conversation?
God, where do you start? I think, well, the media thing is a big one because I hate social media. And to be honest, most people do. And it's actually, I think we do need reminding that there are other ways of getting yourself out there and getting your message out there. But I think, as ever, my big takeaway is talk and share, ladies, because actually we're all just muddling along, whether we're average or not. Because the stuff that comes out, just even from this conversation, yeah, no, it's fantastic. I love your approach, Laura. Brilliant. Yeah, get people to consider something else other than social media and ignore whoever it is, Keith, Betty, Maccapaca.
Or Susan from Carlisle.
They're from Carlisle. And find your rebel. Find your rebel.
All right, Emily, what's sticking with you most from this episode?
Yeah, I just think this idea of perfectionism, it's really about thinking that there's a set of rules you've got to follow. And rules are for children. And when you're an adult, you get to make your own.
Oh,
And yeah, I think that's what we should all be doing.
well, that's
And then
pretty
you could
profound.
break them.
Yeah, but you don't even have rules. That's how grown up you are now. Yeah.
Right.
You have some values and some morals and the rest again, I'd say.
I will be going away to find the name of my inner rebel goddess, whoever the heck is just going to wreak carnage on the world. I think my other takeaway is just how insidious social media is with the messaging that's sending you. Because you were talking about the rags to riches story that you see in the press. My eyebrows went sky high at that point because I don't know how many people I know that are like this. But the idea that that's who gets to feature in the press, that story comes from social media.
Yeah.
It's like the snake eating its tail. It's really insane.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping everybody's going to take the challenge to go away tomorrow or today and be a little more imperfect. Laura, you have been an utterly fantastic guest. We will be having you back for a second episode. I want the story. But just, for people that are listening, if they want to find out more about the work that you do or learn how to be a little bit more imperfect and just basically go kick ass out of the world, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So I am across several different social media platforms, but interestingly, you'll see a different version of me. So the best place to hang out with me is on Instagram. So that's where I tend to.
Is this where we get the slipper photo? Dressing gown and slipper photos on Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram. And I'll go live and I kind of go off on ranty tangents. So yeah, Instagram if you want to see what not being perfect looks like. With dogs barking in the background and sometimes in my dressing gown. Otherwise, I probably share a lot more inspirational stories on Facebook. So you can connect with me, Laura Perks on Facebook or PR with Perks on Instagram.
All right, thank you for that. Now, generally, as we draw to the close, we like to ask our guests a random question. I'm a little bit afraid in this episode.
No.
We want to know, because we're super nosy, is what was the last thing you Googled, Laura?
It's actually really boring. I had to Google what the exchange rate was from the US dollar to the Great British pound. I'm sorry, it's nothing more.
You're on a
Well,
money
I-
podcast.
This is true. I feel like I should have made something up. But I was looking at a new piece of software. It's always in the US. Like, what's going on with people in the US all constantly creating tech that we need for our businesses? But I was like, oh, I don't know what that is in pounds. and I don't know what the exchange rate is. So yeah, I Googled that.
All right, that's great. Look, Laura, you have been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure the listeners have had lots of fun listening to it. Yeah. All right.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Sarah, Emily, thank you very much for joining me on this one.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Good fun. Thank you.
And to you, the listeners, thank you very much, as always, for continuing to listen to us. As Emily helped me plug earlier, our download stats are going up a lot. So thank you very much. And until next time, please do take care of yourselves.